Good morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You are watching World DNA with me, Raisha Sehgal.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar, and on the show today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a telephonic call with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and discussed the ongoing efforts to bring back the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Now, Netanyahu also said that Israel has no interest in conflict with Syria. We'll discuss all that on the show today.
Also on World DNA, we will tell you about how Sri Lankan President Anura Kumar Dissanayake is in India on a 3-day visit. He will hold bilateral talks with Prime Minister Modi later today. Dissanayake will also be participating in a business event in New Delhi. Lots more lined up on the show, but first a quick check on the headlines.
Israel approves a plan to increase the population of the annexed Golan Heights whilst insisting it has no intention of confronting Syria after seizing a UN-monitored buffer zone.
Foreign countries step up efforts to establish contacts with Syria's interim rulers a week after Islamist-led rebels sent President Assad fleeing to Moscow.
Gaza Civil Defense Agency claims Israeli strikes across the Palestinian territory on Sunday killed at least 40 people, including several children. An Al Jazeera TV cameraman and 3 rescuers also killed.
Government of India defers the introduction of One Nation, One Election bills in the lower house of Parliament.
Sri Lankan President Anura Kumar Dissanayake will meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi later today. India and Sri Lanka are expected to sign 4 pacts, including one on cybersecurity.
UK MPs mull over naming Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew allegations, raise calls for caution in UK over bid to re-establish ties with China.
Bitcoin soared over 3% to a record high of $105,000, continuing its rally since Donald Trump's election, optimistic over crypto-friendly regulatory environment under the president-elect.
One of India's most celebrated classical musicians, tabla maestro Zakir Hussain, dies at 73. Recipient of all the Padma Awards, Hussain has received 4 Grammy Awards in his career, including 3 at the 66th Grammy Awards earlier this year.
Several hundreds are feared dead from Cyclone Chido's passage across Mayotte as France rushes in rescue workers and supplies.
La Liga leaders Barcelona slumped to a home defeat against Ligians. The Catalan Giants are only above Atletico Madrid on goal difference and 1 point above Real Madrid. The The Israeli government has approved a plan to increase the population of the annexed Golan Heights.
And this is following the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that his government has unanimously approved $11 million plan for the demographic development of the Golan.
The Golan is home to about 23,000 Druze Arabs whose presence predates the occupation and most of whom retain Syrian citizenship, as well as around 30,000 Israelis. In a statement, Netanyahu's office said, "We will continue to establish ourselves there and settle there as well."
Now, this comes as Israel continues to strike Syria. A Syrian war monitor said that Israeli strikes had targeted military sites in coastal Tartus region, calling them the heaviest strikes in the area in more than a decade. However, Israel claims it does not want a conflict with Syria.
We have no interest in confronting Syria. We will determine Israel's policy towards Syria according to the emerging reality on the ground. I remind you that for decades, Syria was an active enemy state to Israel. It attacked us again and again. It allowed others to attack us from its territory. It allowed Iran to arm Hezbollah through its territory.
Meanwhile, the leaders of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS, Abu Mahmoud al-Golani, met with United Nations envoy Jair Pedersen, who is on a visit to Damascus. Golani discussed with Pedersen the changes that have occurred on the political scene and also underscored the need to update a 2015 United Nations Security Council resolution to suit the new reality in Syria.
Now, HTS is rooted in Syria's branch of Al-Qaeda, the Al-Nusra Front. UN Security Council Resolution 2254 of 2015, to which the rebel statement referred, mentions Nusra's terrorist designation. Now, during the meeting, Pedersen told Golani the fact that Nusra was listed by the UNSC as a terrorist organization was obviously a complicating factor in efforts to find a way forward.
Meanwhile, after the US, the UK has confirmed establishing diplomatic contacts with HTS. UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy acknowledged that the HTS remains a designated terrorist organization, but listed the need for a representative and inclusive government in Syria and also the destruction of Assad-era chemical weapon stockpiles as reasons to maintain diplomatic contact. On the very same day, the Foreign Ministry also announced the release of $63 million of humanitarian aid for the most vulnerable Syrians.
Now, meanwhile, Qatar's embassy to Syria is to resume operations on Tuesday. The Gulf Emirate made the announcement as its diplomats visited the country and met with its transitional government. It also named a new head of mission to Syria, Khalifa Abdullah al-Mohammed al-Sharif. Doha closed its embassy in Damascus and recalled its ambassador in July 2011, early in the uprising against the Assad government that turned into a civil war.
And well, for more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Avner Cohen from Monterey in California. He's a professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies at Middlebury Institute. Welcome to World DNA, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Now, Professor Cohen, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved a plan of the population of the annexed Golan Heights. He further said that this move could strengthen the state of Israel. We've also been seeing Israel striking strategic military sites in Syria. However, Bibi has said that it does not want to get into a war or a conflict with Syria. My question to you is that, considering all of this, what is the aim here or broader objectives for Syria?
Well, I think it's two things. One is Israel wants to emphasize its presence in the Golan Heights. As you know, Israeli Jewish population in Golan Heights is not that high, even though there are some 2 dozen or so small settlements. The amount of money that was allocated is relatively small one, and I think the number is between 20 or 30,000. So if it's double that, it will be another 10 or 15,000. So it's not very, very significant. The political point is that Israel wants to start its an effort to establish a relationship with the informal relationship with the new regime in Damascus in a way that would stress Israel's claims over the Golan Heights. I think at the same time there are efforts, mostly informal, to try to greet and to look for a way by which Israel could establish some kind of connections with the new regime in Damascus.
Absolutely. Now, we also know that UN envoy has called out the resolution 2254 and said that the that he's called the Nusra as the terrorist group. It says so. While the UK and US are trying to establish their relationship with HTS, how do you think the whole thing pans out? We know that they are a terrorist group. How do you think US and UK will try to look at their ties with them?
Well, I think even though the current organization, which is the dominant group among the rebels, used to be at one time terrorists, or used to be an outspring of essentially Al-Qaeda, by now it's clear they're trying to have a different face. And I think it's expressed its effort to be a new leaders of a country and to establish themselves in a different way. I think both the United States, United Kingdom, and countries in Europe trying to accommodate it. So whatever was the case a few years ago, I think there is readiness, and I think it should be also in Israel, to address a new regime in Syria without the prejudices of the past. And I think that to let the benefit of the doubt for the front in Damascus to have a new face.
Dr. Cohen, just to take that point forward, which my colleague made here, and I have to draw this comparison here with a lot of countries, and UK's foreign minister also saying that they are establishing diplomatic ties with HTS. However, HTS remains a proscribed terrorist organization, something which we had seen with the Taliban in Afghanistan. My question to you is that how fast and different will the situation in Syria be from Afghanistan?
I think we need to simply to give a good and fast watch about the fast evolving situation in Syria. So far, there are many signs that the new forces in Syria are trying to greet and to give signals of friendship and to a degree even plurality to various minorities in Syria, including, for example, the tiny Jewish community. And that's the reason why I think that the West should treat the new regime in Syria without prejudice and try to allow them to establish a new face, if that's the case. So it should be a watch and look about this fast evolving situation in Syria.
Right, Dr. Cohen, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA. We'll, of course, have to wait and see how the situation pans out in Syria, but thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, moving on. There are fresh signals of a ceasefire push for Gaza gaining momentum.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump held a telephonic call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday evening.
Now, both leaders discussed a potential hostage deal, the war against Hamas in Gaza, and the situation in Syria. Officials of the Biden administration have also stepped up diplomacy towards closing in on a critical pact by the end of 2024.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo. Reports have suggested that his trip signals a possible breakthrough in negotiations with the Hamas. Sullivan had said earlier that the ceasefire in Lebanon, that's between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, has rather helped clear the way for a potential deal to end the war in Gaza too.
Now, sources say there have been some concessions from the Hamas. Hamas has now reportedly agreed to Israeli forces staying in the Gaza Strip temporarily after fighting ends. It will also provide a complete list of hostages, including Americans, who will be released.
On the ground, Israel continues its onslaught in the Palestinian territory. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency claimed that Israeli strikes across the strip on Sunday killed at least 40 people. This includes an Al Jazeera TV cameraman as well.
Meanwhile, a month after Ireland backed an International Court of Justice case accusing Israel of genocide in the Gaza Strip, Israeli Foreign Ministry announced that it was closing its embassy in Ireland.
The ministry cited the Dublin government's extreme anti-Israeli policies, further straining tense relations between the two nations.
The Israeli economy is sinking.
In the encampments of UCD that forced them to...
All right, moving on. 2 Russian oil tankers were heavily damaged by a storm on Sunday.
The tanker that was carrying thousands of tons of oil products split into half, spilling oil into the Kerch Strait. Another tanker was also in distress after sustaining damage.
Russian investigators, they have now opened 2 criminal cases after a person died on one of the ships. The tankers were wrecked in the Black Sea. Both the tankers were damaged in the Kerch Strait between Crimea and southern Russia's Krasnodar region.
Russian state media said that the Volgo-Neft 212 tanker with 15 people on board split in half with its bow sinking. The Russian-flagged vessel was built in 1969.
And the second Russian flagged ship that sank is Volgo-Neft 239, which also sustained damage. It had a crew of 14 people and was built in 1973. Both the tankers have a loading capacity of 4,200 tons of oil goods.
Now, Russia said over 50 people and equipment, including Mi-8 helicopters and rescue tugboats, are deployed in the area. Official statements don't provide details on the extent of the spill or why one of the tankers sustained such serious damage. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said President Vladimir Putin has ordered the government to set up a working group to mitigate the impact of the fuel spill. All right, shifting our focus now. After spending 19 years in jail, the 5 remaining members of the Australian Bali 9 drug ring flew back home on Sunday.
And this ended a drawn-out saga that had soured ties between Indonesia and Australia. Their release came after much diplomatic effort that drew international attention to Indonesia's unforgiving drug laws.
Indonesian police had arrested the 9 Australians in 2005. They were convicted of attempting to smuggle over 8 kilograms of heroin off the holiday island of Bali. 2 of the gang were executed by firing squad, while the others served hefty prison sentences. The Australian police came under criticism after the Bali 9's arrests for alerting Indonesian authorities to the drug smuggling ring despite the death penalty risk. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that the men returned in the afternoon and thanked Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto for his compassion.
The Australian government did not give further details on the agreement with Jakarta.
The 5 men committed serious offences. Australia shares Indonesia's concern about the serious problem illicit drugs represents. The government will continue to cooperate with Indonesia to counter narcotics trafficking and transnational crime.
Negotiations over the repatriation of the men reportedly picked up after Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto met Albanese on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Peru last month. The Australian government said it had consistently advocated for them and provided consular support to them and their families during their incarceration. It asked the media to respect their privacy.
Australia's national broadcaster ABC said that the men were now free and would not have to serve any prison time at home. In November, a senior Indonesian minister said that Jakarta aimed to return the prisoners from Australia, France and the Philippines by the end of this year. Earlier this month, Indonesia signed an agreement with the Philippines to return Mary Jan Veloso, who is the mother of 2 and was arrested in 2010 after her suitcase was found to be lined with 2.6 kilograms of heroin. The start of the ski season is now revealing several notable trends. Italy is taking the lead as the most budget-friendly destination for skiers.
It is overshadowing traditional alpine favorites like France and Austria. The Post Office Travel Money Ski Resort report says that the one's go-to choices for British skiers, both France and Austria, have seen steep price increases, with the result that no resorts from either country find itself this year in the top 10 list for affordability. Italian resorts, on the other hand, are proving to be the most wallet-friendly this season, with as many as 6 of them landing in the top 10 for best value. Italian resorts are also surpassing Bulgaria, a known low-cost option.
The report examines prices for individuals, adults and family groups in ski resorts across Europe. While Italy dominates the affordability rankings, costs are rising in 2/3 of the featured places. Among the surveyed destinations, Badoncia is the most affordable resort for adults. Other Italian resorts like Levgono and Soste all follow closely behind, showcasing Italy's dominance in this year's survey. For families, Passo Tonale is an attractive choice as well, featuring promotions like free equipment hire for children when booked alongside adult rentals.
Now, this shift comes as the cost of skiing in traditional hotspots like the French and Austrian Alps has surged almost 10% over last year, pricing out many skiers from these once affordable destinations. While the report doesn't factor in travel and accommodation expenses, if you want to enjoy a great ski holiday without breaking the bank, Italy is said to be the place to be this winter. Well, the Christmas market in Western Germany took place in a unique setting that once served as a training facility for miners.
This one-of-a-kind market invited visitors to explore its unique cave-like atmosphere filled with crafts and gifts. Set against the backdrop of a historic slag heap, it also offered a glimpse into the region's mining heritage while also celebrating the holiday spirit. Our next report telling you more. Okay, here is now a wrap of all the climate stories making headlines across the globe. And with that, it's now time to slip into a very short break. But stay tuned. Lots lined up on the other side. You are watching WION World is One.
on platform number 5.
dive into your daily dose of news.
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar, and my colleague Resha Sehgal. Let's start with the headlines.
Israel approves a plan to increase the population of the annexed Golan Heights, while insisting it has no intention of confronting Syria after seizing a UN-monitored buffer zone.
Foreign countries step up efforts to establish contacts with Syria's interim rulers a week after Islamist-led rebels sent President Bashar al-Assad fleeing to Moscow.
Gaza Civil Defense Agency claims Israeli strikes across the Palestinian territory on Sunday killed at least 40 people, including several children. An Al Jazeera TV cameraman and 3 rescuers also killed.
Government of India defers the introduction of One Nation, One Election bills in the lower house of the parliament.
Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake will meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi later today. India and Sri Lanka are expected to sign 4 pacts, including one on cyber security.
UK MPs mull over naming Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew. Allegations raise calls for caution in the UK over bid to re-establish ties with China.
Bitcoin increased over 3% to a record high of $105,000, continuing its rally since Donald Trump's election, optimistic over crypto-friendly regulatory environment under the president-elect.
One of India's most celebrated classical musicians, tabla maestro Zakir Hussain, dies at 73. Recipient of all the Padma Awards, Hussain has received 4 Grammy Awards in his career, including 3 at the 66th Grammy Awards earlier this year.
Several hundred are feared dead from Cyclone Chido's passage across Mayotte as France rushes in rescue workers and supplies.
La Liga leaders Barcelona slumped to a home defeat against the Catalan Giants are only above Atletico Madrid on goal difference and 1 point above Real Madrid.
The Indian government has decided to defer the introduction of bills related to One Nation, One Election.
The bills were set to be introduced in the lower house of the parliament today. The 2 bills, the Constitution Bill Amendment Bill and the Union Territories Laws Bill, have been removed from the revised list of business in Lok Sabha for Monday. As per sources, the central government has decided to introduce the bills later this week. Union Cabinet approved the bills related to One Nation, One Election last week based on the recommendations of a high-level committee headed by former President Ram Nath Kovind. The bills aim to hold all the elections, including that of Lok Sabha, state elections and the local body elections simultaneously.
Government claims that holding elections simultaneously will reduce the cost and burden, increase participation of the voters and also improve election monitoring. However, critics argue that holding simultaneous elections, it will undermine local issues over national issues and also it may lead to multiple constitutional amendments.
All right, Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake is set to meet the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Draupadi Murmu later today in New Delhi.
Dissanayake is on a 3-day visit to India. The Sri Lankan President arrived in India for his first overseas visit after assuming office. Upon his arrival, Anura Kumara Dissanayake was received by the Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, Dr. L. Murugan.
In a social media post on X, the Sri Lankan president stated that he held meetings with India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. The Sanaike is in India at the invitation of External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who was the first foreign dignitary to visit the island nation after the Sanaike took office.
The Sanaike will also attend a business event in New Delhi, which aims to enhance investment and commercial links between the two nations. According to the Ministry of External Affairs India, the Sri Lankan president, will also visit Bodh Gaya as a part of his schedule while he is in India for a span of 3 days. Winters have finally gripped the northern parts of the country, and it will be continuing for the next few days.
In India's Jammu and Kashmir's Srinagar, the weather is likely to remain dry till December 21st, the day when harshest part of the 40-day-long winters arrive.
Well, the city witnessed a low of minus 3.4 degrees Celsius recorded last night. This was 2 degrees Celsius below normal of 1.2 degrees Celsius during this period of the season, with Pahalgam remaining the coldest place at minus 8.4 degrees Celsius. A day ago, the city recorded minus 4 degrees Celsius, and this was 0.7 degrees Celsius below normal. Tourist spot Gulmarg, on the other hand, saw a rise in temperature, which stood at minus 3.8 degrees Celsius against the minus 7.6 degrees Celsius a day ago.
Meanwhile, in the national capital, New Delhi, the minimum temperature dropped to 4.9 degrees Celsius on Sunday, which was below normal by 3.7 degrees, while the maximum was near normal at 23.2 degrees Celsius at Safdarjung station. However, no cold wave conditions were reported in any of the weather stations.
The Indian Weather Department has now predicted moderate fog conditions for the city, with minimum temperature forecast predicted to remain between 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. The maximum temperature for the week is expected to range between 22 and 24 degrees Celsius.
Now, talking about the AQI of the city, the Central Pollution Control Board reported poor air quality at 294 on Sunday, which deteriorated from Saturday's 193. The overall AQI is expected to fluctuate between poor and very poor till Wednesday due to lower wind speeds and a dip in temperature, as the northwestern winds are expected to remain at 8 kilometers per hour for the week. All right, moving on, hundreds or perhaps thousands are feared to be dead in France's Mayotte after Cyclone Chido ripped through the island.
France is now rushing in with rescue workers and supplies. However, their efforts will be hindered by the damage to the airports and electricity distribution in the French Indian Ocean territory.
The wreckage from the destroyed houses, uprooted trees and debris could be seen strewn on the streets of the capital, Mamoudzou, in Mayotte. And according to France's weather service, Meteo France, it was the strongest storm in more than 90 years to hit the islands. In some parts, entire neighborhoods were flattened, while local residents reported many trees had been uprooted and boats had been flipped or sunk. Now, some survivors thought they wouldn't make it through when the Chido storm hit.
I was screaming because I live on my own. But I have neighbors, and after 1 hour of wind, my neighbors came because I had called them on the phone. I was lucky that the phone worked. I called them and they broke my door down and we could be together.
France's Interior Ministry said that it is difficult to get a precise tally of the dead and injured in Mayotte amid fears that the death toll will increase. A local hospital reported that 9 people were in critical condition there and at least 246 others were injured. The tropical cyclone blew through the southeastern Indian Ocean, also affecting the nearby islands of Comoros and Madagascar. Mayotte was directly in its path and suffered extensive damage.
The more than 100 rescuers and firefighters have been deployed in Mayotte from France and the nearby territory of Reunion, and an additional reinforcement of 140 people is due to be sent. Supplies were being rushed in on military aircraft and ships.
French President Emmanuel Macron said he was closely monitoring the situation, while Pope Francis offered prayers for the victims of the cyclone. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has pledged help from the bloc as well. Meanwhile, WHO Chief also offered support.
Just northwest of Mayotte, the Comoros Islands, some of which had been on red alert since Friday, were also hit but suffered only minor damage. Now, Cyclone Chido made landfall in Mozambique early on Sunday, around 40 kilometers south of the northern city of Pemba. The death toll there so far stands at 3. Now, UNICEF said it was on the ground in Mozambique to help the people hit by the storm. Zimbabwe and Zambia could also expect heavy rains from the cyclone.
Moving on to the world of business now, there will be a 24-hour frenzy of choices spearheaded by the Federal Reserve to end the year in which most developed nations were able to begin easing the monetary policies due to falling inflation.
Now, a statement from the U.S. will be front and center on Wednesday, with counterparts from Japan, the Nordic countries, and the United Kingdom following the next day. This makes up half of the world's 10 most traded currency jurisdictions. Those are the main things that investors will be watching as they get ready for the last major week of monetary policy in 2024. The borrowing rates will have been set by at least 22 central banks, representing half of the world's economy by the close of Friday.
The end result will highlight how the easing trend is looking more and more unequal as policymakers consider different risks in the next year. Officials may be reluctant to act quickly in 2025 because of the possibility of inflationary import taxes proposed by the incoming Trump government. Still, the Fed is expected to cut by a quarter point this week before pausing early next year. The Bank of England is aware of the economic shock Trump's trade policies may give out and of the residual price pressures. The BOE is expected to keep rates on hold on Thursday.
The Bank of Japan will likely hold off on hiking interest rates until 2025 after finally pulling out of negative territory this year. Cases in Nordic countries will show that differences can exist even within a relatively small area. There will almost certainly be a fifth cut by Sweden's Riksbank, and Norway's central bank will probably declare they will cut next year. And also, there may be important data about the Chinese economy, a possible uptick in inflation in the UK, and results from Eurozone business surveys as well. In other business news, Chinese bonds are signaling deep skepticism about the country's economic recovery, even as the stock market rallies on hopes of a revival in consumption.
Our next report delves into the data and what it means for China's economy heading into 2025. Take a look.
China's bond market is sending a stark signal. Long-term growth prospects remain bleak. The yield on China's 10-year government bond has plunged more than 80 basis points this year, hitting a record low of 1.78%. Meanwhile, 30-year yields have fallen below 2%, even lower than Japan's 2.24%, an economy known for deflation and stagnation. Despite China's stock market rally driven by hopes of consumption revival, bond investors remain unconvinced. The message is clear. This isn't an earnings or reflation-based rally, and the outlook for growth remains subdued. China's $4.6 trillion bond market reflects a deep skepticism about the economy's recovery. While equity markets have rallied since September on policy support and interest rate cuts, bond yields continue to scrape historic lows. Banks holding over 300 trillion yuan in deposits are pouring cash into government bonds due to weak loan demand. This flood of liquidity has pushed yields down. Analysts note that with low inflation and a sluggish property market, there's little resistance to the ongoing bond rally, signaling slow growth ahead. Investors in Chinese bonds are bracing for a subdued 2025. Goldman Sachs predicts the economic growth to slow to 4.5% next year. In contrast, the stock market has surged on hopes of a consumption revival. But bond experts caution that this optimism isn't supported by fundamentals. As banks shy away from risky loans, the safe haven of government bonds continues to attract cash, driving yields lower and highlighting doubts over China's long-term recovery. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
All right, time now for sports. Manchester United scored twice in the dying minutes to stun Manchester City 2-1 in the English Premier League.
Amad Diallo was the star for the Red Devils as they piled more misery on Pep Guardiola's side, who have now secured just one victory in 11 games across all competitions.
Now, United manager Ruben Amorim dropped a bombshell by dropping Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho as once again their lineup was leaked before the match. It was a caggy affair at the Etihad Stadium.
Giant leap. What I have to do, keep working, but I'm the boss, I'm the manager, and I'm not good enough. It's as simple as that. I have to find a way to talk to them, to train to them, to the way you have to.
Well, throughout December, visitors can catch a glimpse of a jolly guest in red and white swimming alongside marine life in the 120,000-gallon window on Washington Water's habitat.
And the FIBA, a research driver and a volunteer, brings Diving Santa to life, promoting environmental conservation and holiday cheer. The aquarium's tradition of hosting a Diving Santa has been going on for around 15 years. Families can snap photos with Santa Claus inside the habitat while learning about the importance of ocean conservation. Seattle Aquarium's 15-year tradition of hosting Diving Santa continues throughout December. We leave you with these visuals and our next report as we call it a wrap. Thank you for staying with us. You are watching Beyond World is One. Stay tuned.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world.